Hello, welcome back to EOCON 2023. Today, October 27, we are starting the second phase of the day. So can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, fine. Thank you. So thanks for everyone to be around here. And thanks to the sponsors that you can see on the screen. They really support us to realize this event. So we thanks them very much. And today we had already two sessions before, and we are starting our third one. We'll be having three others. So after the one presented by Thomas Marquez now, we'll be having Shuchi Kasi for Ernest and Young, and also later on Olayinka. Yeah, starting at 6 p.m. So at the end of the day, Bertin Abene will be presenting also. So without wasting time, I would like to introduce you to our next speaker. So today we are introducing Thomas Marquez. So Thomas Marquez is a pen tester with the focus on red team. Yeah, red team pen testing. So I will let him introduce himself, and he is going to present us a tool, his tool that he developed for red team pen testing with the name of Nightwalker. So Thomas, can you put your camera on, please?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I will let you introduce yourself, and I wish you good luck. Thanks for being here.
Okay, thank you. I will just share my screen. Right. So hello everyone, my name is Thomas. I am a pen tester and red teamer. I'm also on the side the co-founder of Boa CTF, which is a CTF competition we are building up. And in this session, I'm going to talk about some EDR evasion techniques. So let's jump in. So in this talk, just to give you an overview, I will explain what are Windows API and how they interact with the operating system. Windows API is actually a good thing if you want to learn how the post-exploitation tools works on Windows. I will also highlight some EDR detection mechanism and some techniques to bypass them. So first of all, let's just establish a small difference that exists between antivirus and EDR solution. So usually the antivirus is going to detect malware based on signature, heuristic, and real-time detection, which is a memory scan when the program is running. But the EDR solution will gather all the antivirus detection mechanism plus additional one, such as kernel callbacks, which has just a notification that the EDR solution can register inside the kernel, and then it's going to receive notification based on some process event. For example, if you try to access another process, the EDR is going to receive a notification about that event. We also have DLL hooking, which is a technique used by the EDR vendors just to check the parameters that we are going to pass on specific functions. We also have mini filter drivers, which are just file system input-output request that the EDR is going to check just to do some scanning on the files and inside the directories. We have also call stack tracing, which is the way for some EDRs to see the address inside the process from where a Windows API call was originated. So they're going to do a call stack tracing just to see where the API call was executed. And if, for example, your shell code is not encrypted, it's going to flag your binary as malicious. And also EDR also aggregate data from more sources compared to antivirus. For example, Microsoft Defender for endpoint, we will usually have a specific solution to gather more information or detection on Microsoft Office files such as Windows Word and Excel files. Now here in the image on the top, you have it's just the process that are related to Windows Defender. So if your computer has Windows Defender, you will see these two processes. The first one is related to the network detection, and then the second one is the malware protection engine that we know as Defender. But then if, for example, the same computer is using Defender Advanced Threat Protection, which is like the EDR version of Windows Defender, what you are going to actually see is that there will be more sensor. For example, you have a sensor related to the network detection and response, and then you also have a sensor related to the threat vulnerability and management. Then you have the principal sensor to do the detection. And obviously you have the normal program related to the normal Windows Defender. So now, just to understand what are Windows API, Windows API functions are just a set of functions that are defined by Microsoft that we can use to interact with the operating system. Just to give you an example, you have open process, which is a Windows function that is used if you want to access another process. If you want to obtain a handle on another process, you need to call this function. And the Windows API function are exported by libraries or DLLs. You have a list of them here. For example, kernel 32 and user 32. You have more of them. This is where this Windows API function reside. And then what you are actually going to see is that all these functions are going to call another set of functions which reside inside a library called ntdll. Just to give you an example, if, for example, in my program I call the function open process. This function resides inside kernel 32. Automatically in the background, while my process is running, this function is going to call another function called open process, but which resides in another DLL called kernel-based DLL. And then this one is going to call the NT-open process function, which resides inside NTDLL. So as you can see, all these functions are always going through NTDLL before going to the kernel. As you can see here, after the NT-open process call inside NTDLL, we are going to make a transition to the kernel which is a syscall or system call. And then inside the kernel, we are going to execute our code. This transition here is based on what we call a number, a syscall ID number, which is related to every function. So every function will have a different number, and then this number is going to transit inside the kernel, and then the kernel is going to use that number to find the associated code. So usually, if you look up how to execute a shell code, you're going to find like a code such as this one. This is what I call the script way. So basically, we are just using open process to open a handle in another process. Then we are going to use virtual alloc s to allocate memory inside a remote process, write process memory to copy the shell code inside that process, and then create remote thread to execute that shell code in a new thread. Obviously, as soon you compile this and then you put this on this, any antivirus or ADI in the world is going to flag this as malicious because there are a lot of IOCs that are with this way of executing a shell code. So just to give you an example of this IOC, you have, first of all, the shell code is not encrypted, and it can easily be detected by a sandbox, and there are highly suspicious functions that are called. When we talk about suspicious functions, we are mainly talking about virtual alloc S and write process memory and create remote thread, which are functions that have been so abused by the malware developers out there. Also, there is no DLL unhooking, so the EDR can inspect all the function parameters and it's going to see when we try, for example, to call write process memory to copy our shellcode, the EDR is going to see our shellcode in plain text because it's not encrypted, and then it's obviously going to terminate our process. We also have suspicious thread creation, which is when we use create remote thread, you're going to execute your shellcode inside a new thread, and this thread obviously is going to be readable and executable, and this is usually a red flag for EDR vendors because it's not going to be backed by any module, which is what we call unbacked memory region. I will explain it later. Yes. Okay, so if we just want to get our shellcode load a little bit better, one thing we can start doing first of all is to encrypt our shellcode using, for example, SHA SE4 or AES encryption. Here in blue, you have a meterpreter shellcode in memory of a program, and it is SHA encrypted. And in red is the same shellcode, but not encrypted in plain text. So if a EDR is doing a memory scan, this is what it's going to see, and then it's going to flag our binary as malicious. You need also to pay attention that encryption usually is going to raise the entropy level of your binary. When we talk about entropy level, it's the level of randomness of your binary. So if you have a encrypted shellcode inside your binary, the entropy level of your binary is going to be high. And then some EDRs like Sentinel-1 is going to launch an alert inside the EDR console. And then if it maybe get investigated by the SOC analyst or something like that, you might be flagged. So something to do instead of encryption, you can use obfuscation. For example, using a UUID. For example, you convert your meterpreter shellcode or Cobalt Strike shellcode to a UUID string, and then you put it in your binary, and then you decrypt it at runtime. You deobfuscate it at runtime using this Windows API call, which is UUID from string A. Another solution that you can also implement is to fetch the shellcode at runtime from a remote server, so that the entropy of your binary is not going to be high, but then you fetch the shellcode at runtime and it's going to be much better. Obviously, you need to be careful because the API call that you are going to use to fetch the shellcode might be hooked. So just take that into consideration. So when we talk about unbacked memory region, what is that? Just to give you an example, here in blue, we have a memory region, which is a 4 kilobyte memory region, which is readable and writable. And it is associated to this library, which is called NTDLL. And in red, you have this one, which is also 4 kilobyte, readable and writable, but this one is not associated to any module, so you don't see anything here. And this is going to be suspicious because in order for us to execute our shellcode, we need to make this region readable and executable. And then when this is going to turn into an executable region, the ADR is going to see that we have a readable and executable region, which is not associated to any module. And this is 100% suspicious, and the EDR is going to trigger a memory scan. What can you do to avoid this? You can use a technique called module stomping, which basically means you need to load a Benin DLL into the current or remote process, and then you move your shellcode inside that library or inside that DLL, and then you execute it from there. And when it's going to get executed, you will now see that in this column here, you will have the name of the library from where you are executing your shellcode. Obviously, you need to take into consideration that the DLL that you are going to load will have enough space to hold your shellcode. Another technique that I think was released this year that you can use is Mockingjay technique. The idea here is to reuse readable, writable, and executable region from legitimate modules that already exist. The problem, the difficulty here is that you need to find a module that have a free readable, writable, and executable region that you can use large enough to hold your shellcode. So that's a little bit difficult, but it can be done. And then we also have a technique called call stack tracing evasion. So the idea here is just to proxy all the DLL loads that we are going to do, or the API calls using thread pools. I'm going to explain it later because it's a little bit complicated. Another thing we can implement inside our shellcode to be a little bit more stealth is a function called obfuscation. So basically here, what we are doing is instead of directly calling, for example, this function entity create section, what we are going to do, we are going to retrieve the address of this function at runtime. And when we do that, the name of this function is not going to appear inside the import address table. If we call this function directly, it's going to appear inside the import address table. And as soon our file touch the disk, the EDR can actually inspect the import address table of our binary, and it's going to see the list of all the functions that we are calling. So if you are calling a lot of malicious Windows functions, so the EDR is going to flag our binary. So we can use this technique. We use get module handle function to retrieve a handle to the DLL or to the library where the function entity create section is, and then we use get proc address to retrieve the address of the function. The problem with this technique is that these two Windows API functions can be hooked by the EDR. So what you can actually do, and what is recommended to do, is you implement your own function, your own version of get proc address and get module handle. That's actually what I did here. I just put a screenshot. I implement my own version of get proc address, and then I actually resolve the entity DLL address at runtime, and then I access the entity create section function at runtime with my own version of get module handle. You can also combine this technique with API hashing, so that instead of having the string of the function or the library hard-coded in your program like I have here, you convert this string into a hash, and then you just compare the hash with the list of functions to retrieve the function that you want. This is just to make the job for the reverse analyst, the reverse engineer, a little bit more difficult, or if someone just is looking at the strings of our binary, he won't see the names of the function that we are calling. So another technique that we can implement is patching. So the idea here is that since we have access to everything inside our process, we can tamper with some user mode protection. And when we talk about the user mode protection, here we are talking about, for example, ETW. ETW means event tracing for Windows. This is just a mechanism for Windows to trace and log events that are raised by user mode application. So while our program is running, the ETW is going to use this function entity trace event to log our process, what we are doing inside our process. So with patching, we can actually access the entity trace event function like I did here in this piece of code. I access the trace event function inside my process, and then at the address of this trace function, I just put a return instruction so that each time ETW try to call trace event, the function will just return. This byte is just an assembly byte, which means a return instruction so that the function is not going to be called. We can also do the same for AMSI, which is the anti-malware scan interface. So here, what we are going to target is the AMSI scan buffer function inside AMSI library. So AMSI scan buffer is the function responsible to scan PowerShell scripts, and then it's going to return whether or not the script is malicious. So what I'm doing here is that I make AMSI scan buffer return always false, and then the AMSI will assume that all the scripts are not malicious, and then I can execute PowerShell script in my post exploitation process. Unfortunately, patching can be detected by EDR, for example, Sentinel-1. So a safer option is to use hardware breakpoint, but this is also like a lot more difficult. I won't dig into the detail because it's actually a really difficult technique to implement correctly. But the idea here is that we are going to use the debug register from 0 to 3 to hold the address of the function we want to patch, and then we are going to raise an exception based on some specific breakpoint, just like when your program is running and then there is an exception. The thing is, when we are going to manually raise an exception, and then when the exception occurs, the program will pass the execution to a custom function that we define, and then inside that custom function, we are going to work to change the stack of our program. Why is it difficult? Because we need to be careful, and then we need to do this with assembly instruction. So this is a little bit more difficult to implement. Now let's talk about EDR hooking. Like I said before, EDR hooking is just a mechanism for EDR vendors to detect to check the parameters that we are passing on specific function. So normally, if NTDLL is not hooked, when we call, for example, an API like virtual alloc, it's going to do the normal way, going to call virtual alloc inside kernel base, and then going inside NTDLL to call NT-allocate virtual memory. And then from NTDLL, it's going to make the transition inside the kernel, which is something that we call system call. And then it's going to look inside the system service descriptor table for a number. You can see it, for example, here in this image. You can see that inside this is NT create session, is another function, but these instructions are always the same. The only thing that changed is this number here, because this is the syscall ID number, and it's different for each function. So you can see we have this number pushed into the EAX register, and then we do the system call instruction. This instruction is the same as this one. Then you go inside the kernel, and we look for this number inside the kernel to be executed with the respective function. And then what EDR actually start doing is that they start hooking, which means when we land inside NTDLL, instead of having this RCX push into the R10 register, what we are going actually to have is this address push into the R10 register, and then we are going to have a jump instruction. Jump instruction in assembly is just a way for us to go to another memory address. So you can see here from NTDLL, we go inside the EDR hooking DLL. And then what the hooking DLL is going to do is the EDR is just going to check the parameters of our function. And if nothing is malicious, it's going to return the execution to NTDLL. But if the EDF finds something malicious in the parameters that we are passing, it's going to terminate our program. So a technique to solve DLL unhooking, the EDR hooking, you can implement DLL unhooking. There are multiple variations of DLL unhooking, but the one that I usually prefer to use is called Perun's fart. So basically the idea here is that we have our program, our malware.exe, and then we are going to create a new process inside in suspended state using the Windows API function called create process. We create a process in suspended state. And why do we need to create a process in suspended state? Because when a process is launched in suspended state, the EDR didn't have time to hook anti-DLL. So that's why we will have a process in suspended state with a clean anti-DLL. And then what we do is we get the anti-DLL base address inside our program. And since this process is the child process of our own, the anti-DLL base address is going to be the same inside both of them. So we find the anti-DLL base address inside our program, and then we go inside the suspended process. We copy the whole anti-DLL module inside our own program. We look for the .text section. Why do we need to do this? Because all the Windows API functions that are inside anti-DLL reside inside the text section. So we go there, we grab the whole text section with all the Windows API function, and then we copy it inside the text section of our malicious DLL, which is of the DLL of our program, which is hooked by the EDR. And now we have a clean anti-DLL. Another technique that we can use is called, inside our shellcode loader, is called direct syscall. Direct syscall, there are multiple variations, but the one that I'm going to present here is called Halo's Gate. It's a technique used to call Windows API function when they are hooks. So with this technique, we don't need to unhook. We don't need to do DLL unhooking, because we are going to, as you can see here, we check, for example, we check first if the first instruction of the function is E9. As you can see here, we have an instruction E9, and then we have a memory address. This is just a jump instruction, which means this function is hooked. So what we are going to do is we're going to go up and down inside that DLL. If you check this function, you're going to see that, as always, we have this number, the syscall ID number, which is pushed into the EAX register. And then the function after this one, the syscall ID number is 29. So these syscall ID numbers are actually sequential. So if you check, for example, this one and it is hooked, you just go back or forward and to check until you find one which is not hooked, because the EDR never hook all the Windows functions. Not all of them are hooked, just some specific ones that are used for malicious purpose. So in this case, for example, if we check before this function, and we see that the syscall ID number 27, we can assume that the syscall ID number for this function is 28. And now, why do we need the syscall ID number? Because what we are going to actually do with direct syscall is that we are going to write assembly instruction inside another file. As you can see here, this address the same instruction that you can see here. We have the SEX push into the R10 register, and then we have the syscall ID number push into the EAX register. In this case, it's a variable because we need to retrieve the syscall ID number at runtime. We can't hard-code the syscall ID number because the syscall ID number is different between every Windows version, and sometimes even between different release of Windows. So we can't predict what number we are going to have. So we need to retrieve this at runtime. So, and then we do the syscall instruction inside our assembly file. The problem with direct syscall is that you are going to see it now. The syscall instruction take place outside of NTDLL. Just to see, we have the syscall instruction inside our assembly file. And usually, let's see. Okay, but normally the syscall instruction need to take place inside NTDLL. You can see here you have NTDLL, and then here you also have the syscall instruction here. It need to take place inside NTDLL. So that's why I'm saying that the syscall instruction take place outside of NTDLL. And another thing is that the return instruction get executed within the memory of the direct syscall assembly. So normally, when we have a normal program, when you execute a normal program, when the execution of the program return from the kernel and back to the user mode, are going to see always the first module is going to be NTDLL. This is for a normal program, going to be NTDLL. But when we are using direct syscall, the program gets back from the kernel, what it's going to see is going to see the address of our assembly file where we are making the syscall instruction. So this is the EDI is going to see this and it's going to flag it as malicious. So we need to find a way to have NTDLL here. So one way to do it is to use indirect syscall. So indirect syscall is just like almost the same as direct syscall. The only difference is that now the execution of the syscall command take place within the memory of NTDLL. Why? Because we still have our assembly file. We still have our assembly instruction. We have the syscall ID number here pushed into the EAX register. But now, instead of performing the syscall transition to the kernel inside our assembly file, we're just going to do a jump to the syscall instruction of the associated function. That's why we have a jump instruction here. And also you can see it here. We have our malware program, and then we have our assembly instruction inside our program. And then we jump directly into the syscall instruction inside NTDLL. Now, unfortunately, again, indirect syscall can still be detected by the EDR. How? Because for a normal program, as I mentioned before, when the program returns the execution from kernel to user land, you need to see NTDLL, but before NTDLL, you need to see a module such as kernel base or kernel32.dll. But in the case of indirect syscall, the EDI is going to see NTDLL, which is normal, but before NTDLL, it's going to point to the assembly file, which is malicious. And nowadays, there are some advanced EDR that check the whole call stack chain just to find this malicious behavior. So if you have some thing which is not correct inside your stack, the EDR is going to flag it. So which led me to explain what is stack tracing. So stack tracing is just like it's a technique used by some EDR there are some EDR that only rely on stack tracing. So basically, you have, for example, Elastic EDR and Microsoft Defender for endpoint. The idea here is that you can see, just to give you an example, for example, this is a notepad process, and I injected a Meterpreter shellcode inside this notepad process, and I executed it from there. So if you look at the threads of this notepad, you are going to see that there will be one thread which is not associated to any module, any integer module. It's going to be associated, you have this one. And then if you look inside that one, you see some suspicious memory regions. And then if you access those regions, we are going to, the AGI is going to see, for example, here we have a readable and executable region, which is not backed by any module, as we see before. And this is highly suspicious. And then it's going to check the memory, and then it's going to see our whole shell code or metaprocessor payloads. So, and also you need to take into consideration that when you execute your shell code, it might load additional dependencies using load library function. This is load library function is a Windows API function used to load additional DLLs or libraries. So what can we do to solve stack tracing? We can actually use Windows callbacks. Callbacks are just functions that get executed by another function. So what we are going to do here, we are going, instead of calling, for example, load library ourselves inside our program, we are going to use, for example, this function, which is called TP alloc work. TP stands for thread pool. And then this function, we are going to pass the load library. This function is going to take another function as a parameter. In our case, we want to execute load library. So we are going to pass the load library as a parameter, and then load library itself takes one parameter, which is the name of the DLL that we want to load. And you have the parameter for load library here. And then when we call this function, tpalloc work, it's going to execute load library on our behalf. And when the EGI is going to check the call stack of load library, it's just going to see that load library was executed by TP post work. As you can see here, TP post work gets executed when our program returns from the kernel. Will get executed. This is what the EGI is going to see, and then TP post work was executed by ATL user thread side. So as you can see here, no readable and executable region. Now, this is not that easy to implement because, for example, in the case of load library, we have the function load library only takes one parameter, which is the name of the DLL. But if you want to use it or combine this with indirect syscall and, for example, call API function that take more than one parameters, it's going to be a little bit difficult because then you have to use assembly instruction to push those parameters onto the stack of your program. So it can be a little bit difficult to implement. But it works great against the EGR that check the call stack. So finally, what I want to present you is Nightwalker, which is a tool that I started developing, and then Processes, for those who know him, joined me. And I actually want to thank him because he's the one who did all the testing against the EGI, the one who had access to all the EGI that I tested against. So thanks to him for that. And also just to put a small disclaimer here, this tool, I don't recommend you to use this tool for professional engagement. If you want, for example, if you want to do something like this for professional engagement, we actually need, for example, to convert my tool into a DLL. This is actually what I use, and I use it in some real team engagement. I convert this tool to a DLL, and then I use a technique called DLL hijacking by proxying. So basically, I just put the DLL inside the Teams folder, and each time a user open this Teams application, my DLL gets executed. And since Teams is a Microsoft signed binary, it didn't raise any suspicions. So and also not all of the techniques that I I talk about here, I implemented inside my tool. And there are also some techniques that I implemented inside my tool that I didn't explain here, for example, such as the early bird process injection. And I didn't talk about it because I prefer to talk about the indirect and direct system core, because these are the ones that have more success right now. So I prefer to talk about them. So these are some results for our testing, or for our testing of. You can see the only using the early bird injection technique. The only one that wasn't that was caught is Kaspersky. Actually, it was actually difficult to bypass Kaspersky. But for example, for Sentinel-1, it was executed, but inside the EDR console, there was this alert. So just have it into consideration that even though your malware get executed, it might trigger some alerts. So that's why it's usually recommend doing a little bit of testing before using it in real engagement. Also, depending of the EDR that you are going against, you will have different behavior or different type of alerts, because not all the EDR have the same detection mechanism. This is another injection technique that I use, because this one was getting flagged by Kaspersky, and then I use this one. This is just create thread with EAT, the import adjustable hooking. I didn't explain it here, but then I think I put some reference at the end if you want to learn more about this tool. But we are going to see a video where this technique is going in action. So I think this is a demo video that I have for Defender, but I actually want to first show you the one from Kaspersky. Yeah, just I want to show. Okay. So this video was taken by processes. So it's just showing that there is no exclusion folders inside Kaspersky, and that all the protection are activated. And now he's going to execute our payload, and you can see I have a 1 minute wait time here, because I realized that when I was calling the create thread function, Kaspersky was actually doing a memory scan. And since I need to decrypt my shellcode in order to execute it, Kaspersky was flagging my malicious shellcode and was flagging my binary. So what I did is I use a technique called EAT hooking. So whenever I call the function create thread, the execution of my program gets redirected to another custom function that I implemented. And while Kaspersky is doing the memory scan, I maintain my shellcode encrypted for 1 minute. And then after 1 minute, I decrypted the shellcode. I assume that the memory scan of Kaspersky is going to be run for less than 1 minute. So I just put 1 minute to be safe. And after the 1 minute, I decrypt my shellcode, and then I execute it again, which, as you can see, it doesn't get detected anymore. And this one is for Sentinel-1. As you can see here, it's just showing that there is no exclusion folders again. So I'm just going to pass it, and then he's going to execute it. And I think he's going to execute it here. As you can see for the Sentinel one, here we have AMSI patching, and I also had ETW patching, but he had to remove the ETW patching because Sentinel one was detecting the ETW patching. As I mentioned before, some EDR detect the patching, and how they detect the patching. Well, it can be based on the memory protection level, because in order for us to patch a function, we need to change the permission of that memory. We need to make it at least readable and writable. So we need to change it. So Sentinel-1 was actually detecting this behavior, and then it was killing the process. Another technique that EDR sometimes use to detect the patching is that they compare the memory of that function when it is inside the process, inside the program, and the memory of that function while it is on disk. And then you do a comparison, and then you check if it's different, it's going to detect the patching technique. So you can see here, if you remove the ATW patching, then the process gets executed normally. We don't have any detection in regard of our program. This is a cobalt white beacon. So yeah, and then it's just doing some interaction with the beacon. So these are some reference that I put if you want to dig a little bit deeper inside some of these techniques. So obviously these techniques are not exhaustive, so there are a lot more techniques out there. If you try to look, you find a lot more of them, but there is also a lot of variation of these ones. So just pick what you want and learn it and try to implement it, and then go for it. So now I thank you, everyone. We reach the end of this presentation. If you have any question, I am available.
Yes, sure. Thanks for your presentation. Thanks for your presentation. We still have some questions. We have some questions. Yeah, there's in the box chat box, you can see Jan Richard asking, and it's followed by Daphnia. So I don't know if you have it in front of you.
Yes, I have it. So I have a question here. Is there a clear checklist created to test end-to-end circumvention of defense and verify that the defense uh, cover the maximum possible security requirements in terms of at least what it is that you necessarily without a checklist for test on this side? Just to respond to this question from Yan Richard Somba, I actually don't have a checklist. I just go with what I know that usually the EDR detects. So obviously, different EDR is going to are going to detect on different things, but there are always some common things that we know that all the EDR detects again. Also, if you trying to look to read a lot about another malware developer, they usually tell you why some EDR flag some stuff. So what I just did is I just went with what I know that the EDR is going to flag as malicious. For example, the malicious stuff that I presented here that EDR flags. If you can implement a program, for example, which use all of this technique, it's going to be really difficult for an EDR solution nowadays to detect it. And also, the only thing is, usually in big corporation, the EDR is not the only thing that you need to take care of. There is also sometimes firewall, there are a lot of another stuff, but in this case, we are just targeting the EDR solution. So this technique, implementing this technique will actually work like maybe not with all the EDR that exist, but a lot of them, like maybe 90% of them. But no, I don't have a specific checklist. And with free, based on the test result, you sure doesn't mean Kaspersky is currently the best EDR. I think Kaspersky is not even an EDR, at least the Kaspersky version that I test here is just a antivirus, a premium antivirus. It's not an EDR, but it's actually quite strong for an antivirus. It gave me a lot of trouble, but yeah. Uh, so no, I won't say Kaspersky is the best EDR. So is assembly language necessary in order to be a web teamer or in order to do what you do for you? Now, assembly language is not necessary because to be a web teamer, because in web team operation we don't have only malware development, so you have another stuff. So I don't think assembly language is necessary, but obviously it's going to be a huge help if you know assembly and then you want to implement or develop some custom tools. Talk about some practical use case where your tool networker was useful to you. As I think I mentioned it, the tool as it is, the one that I released to the public is as it is not going to be helpful in writing engagement, but what you can do is compile that tool instead of compiling it as a executable, you compile it as a DLL file, and then you can use a technique like the one that I mentioned, the DLL hijacking by proxying. And obviously, this is going to, if you do it in the web team engagement, this tool is actually the last stage if you are doing a web team of engagement, because usually at the beginning you have maybe a phishing campaign first, and then maybe you have an Excel file that is going to download this tool and put it inside a Teams folder of your victim, and that is just but actually, yes, so to answer your question, yes, I use it, the TLL version, I use it in real engagement. You shouldn't use it for processing. In which kind of setting should we use it then? I mean, I just released it first of all, I developed it because I wanted to learn more about these techniques, and then I release it for other people if another people want to learn or see how malware are built. Because also while I was building this, I had to read a lot of blogs from another malware developers out there, and I had to read through another tools that are free on GitHub. So I just released mine just to help also the community. Okay. Another question. I want to know if government regulate the use of offensive tradecraft tool. I don't think the government regulated. I mean, there are a lot of public tools on GitHub that are related to malware. So the thing is, when you publish a tool on GitHub, after a couple of hours, all the antivirus and EDR solution already have a signature for that. Actually, my tool, when I publish it, after 2 weeks, I tried to execute it on my own computer, and then it was getting flagged by Defender. And then when I went to check which part of my binary was getting flagged, it was getting flagged based on the printf statement that I have on my binary. And then I just remove some of these printf statements, and then my binary wasn't detected again by Defender. Where can we download Nightwalker? I have the link in my presentation, but I can also put it in the chat. Nightwalker. Let me just put it in the chat quickly. Okay. What are some of the skill and expertise required to effectively use offensive trade-off tools like the null worker app? Actually, you just need to be good at you need to understand how how Windows internal works, and then you need to understand the Windows API function, how they work, and how you can use them to interact with the operating system. And there are actually some course online that that I took like a year or two ago that helped me in the beginning. And there are also a lot of blogs or people that you can follow on Twitter or on GitHub that release sometimes some blog or tools that you can read through, and then you can pick up some ideas and implement your own. So this is usually what I do. Just a GitLab tool for your tools, which is called example. Okay, I just put the link of my tool on GitHub, and I also have a blog where I explain the techniques that I implemented in my tool. So I'm also going to put it here. You should, yes, I will upload my presentation in the chat. I think there are no more questions.
No questions for the moment.
Yeah. So,
Except we will check again on the social medias. Okay, thank you for the PPT. There's a last question.
what are some of the potential unintended consequences of using offensive tradecraft tools like the Networker app? I mean, if you are going to use it in a red team engagement, for example, you need to make sure that your program only gets executed on the specific system or in a specific case. For example, if you are doing a red team engagement for company A, you need to make sure that your your tool only get executed for computers that are associated to company A. And how can you do that? You can, for example, do a little check inside your program just to check, for example, the domain associated with the computers. If the domain is the domain of the company, the Active Directory domain is the same of the company, or maybe if you know that all the company is using a VPN, you can maybe make a request to a host which is inside that company VPN network just to see if it is a host connected to that company. So these are just some mechanisms that you can implement in your binary so that it doesn't get executed, for example, for if someone plug it or try to execute it in his personal computer.
Another question.
Okay, is what do you think about fully undetectable crypto? First of all, there is no such thing as fully undetectable because there is no technique that's going to bypass all the EDF. And then, as I mentioned before, even if your binary gets executed, it might trigger some alerts also. So I don't think there's something like fully undetectable. And also, all the public tools that are out there usually for malware development, such as the one that I released, I already flagged by all the antivirus and media vendors. So if you want to use them, you would need to do a huge to modify it yourself. Can you leave free lab links to practice it to research? I don't actually don't have any resource for labs, but I have maybe some courses you can take if you want to learn more about this. I'll just put the one that I think is the most valuable to me now, right now is this one. I mean, you said free. This one is not free, but I think free. The only thing free that you can use to learn about this stuff is following others malware developers, and then they usually have blogs just like mine, and then you just go and read that blogs. That's the only free thing that you are going to find. But if you want to pay for some courses or something like that, this is the best one that I could recommend you.
Okay. I think it's the end for the questions. Okay. Thanks for your presentation, Thomas.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, it's the first time for you being with us in EOCON, but that's a very good presentation you did. And I think people will be around you looking for some explanations later on. That's why I'm going to share your LinkedIn so that they could contact you inbox and continue
no problem.
the research. So this is the LinkedIn from Thomas. Okay, I just shared it. So we were happy to have you this time, and then we hope that you will be available again for another exciting, such an exciting presentation next year.
Yeah,
thank you again.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night. So we are going to introduce the next speaker. We're going to choose the next speaker. Hello, Shuchi, are you here?
Yes, Audrey. Hi, I'm here.
Okay, welcome to EOCON 2023, Shuchi. So it's a pleasure to see you and to have you there. So let me just do this. Okay. Okay. Welcome, Shruti. And I'll just have to introduce Shruti. Shruti is the Strategy and Transaction Director at Ernst & Young. And she is a seasoned cybersecurity professional with over 10 plus years of technical expertise in VAPG, regulatory compliance, like PCI clients, to support them in mergers, acquisitions, and divestitures. So today she's going to present the security challenges in generative AI. So Shruti, if you can hear me, I will allow you to share your presentation, and then you can also introduce yourself again to the audience. So I wish you good luck and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Audrey. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Shruti Kalsi, and I am a director at EY Parthenon US. I work with a lot of C-suite executives, and I help drive value to businesses through cybersecurity. So that's particularly my job. Within mergers and acquisitions, I try to find out ways where we can help clients build a better security program for their companies, and not only build better program, create value through cybersecurity for companies. And that happens when we align cybersecurity to their strategic viewpoints and their strategic perspectives. So that's a long thing there. So Today, I'll be covering security challenges in generative AI, and I am looking forward to have a very interactive session with all of you. And Audrey, correct me if I'm wrong. The audio, I'm sorry, the speaker or interaction based on audio is disabled for participants, but they can interact through chat, right? Audrey, the participants can interact through chat.
Okay, let me stop this sharing. Try again to share your presentation.
Oh, no, you can share my presentation. I was just asking if the audience can interact through chat or they have their, audio enabled where they can speak.
Okay, mostly since the beginning of the conference, when they have questions, they will just post it, and then at the end of the presentation, you just reply.
Okay, perfect. Yep. You can bring the presentation back up.
Okay.
If you can, please.
You want me to share your presentation? Okay, no problem.
Yes, that's right. Thank you.
This.
I can share my screen as well, Audrey, if that's okay. Just in the interest of time, I have that presentation open.
Okay, fine.
All right. Let me just quickly do that. Yes. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can see you.
All right, then. So generative AI it is. So just before I dive into the presentation, can anybody tell me what is generative AI? Through the chat or anything that you like.
So as the presentation of Shruti is interactive, we can allow people to unmute their microphones, but make sure when you finish talking, we put the microphone off, please. Thank you.
All right. So anybody there who can just, want to unmute and say what is generative AI?
Maybe the chat box, actually.
All right, I can. Yeah, that's correct. It's like ChatGPT. ChatGPT is a great example of generative AI. So let me just dive into what generative AI is. Generative AI is something that is able to generate some kind of data based out of inputs. Now, that's something that AI normally does. AI is basically a setup of algorithms where we have some inputs and we get some outputs. Yes, but what's different with generative AI? Generative AI creates something called as synthetic data. So I'll just dive into synthetic data, what synthetic data is. But one of the greatest and the latest examples that we have for generative AI is ChatGPT. We have Googlebot, which is kind of, everyone says it's kind of a copy of ChatGPT or a competition to ChatGPT. I've not personally used Bot. I've used ChatGPT. And there is also one example, which is Alpha 3D, which is basically an application or a software which can convert any 2D image into 3D. So these are some great examples of what we mean by generative AI. Now, generative AI produces something called as synthetic data. Now, what is this synthetic data? Synthetic data is basically data which has been created out of certain inputs. Now, I'll just share some examples with you, which I have been able to get from ChatGPT and from internet. Now, if you see on the left-hand side, this is something. Let me just have my laser here. Yeah, if you see here, now this is something that I was able to produce via ChatGPT. Now, what is this? So I simply wrote a line, which is basically a line from a poem. The woods are lovely, dark, and deep. That was it that I had written. But this interpretation of that poem has been coming out from ChatGPT. Like, we did not feed that, but this is something that ChatGPT has been able to come up based on certain inputs or certain data that has been fed to the program, and it is able to interpret something and produce completely new synthetic generative that only the program has been able to do. Humans have not provided this data to the chat gpt program. Now this is generative AI and this is synthetic data, which is not original in its form, but it has been generated or derived from original data, which is basically the work chat gpt does. And this is what I mean by synthetic data. Another example I can give you here is the picture on the right hand side, which are some famous celebrities from Hollywood. One is Leonardo DiCaprio, one is Robert Downey Jr. So these images of people, they are fake. They're AI generated images. Only their faces, and even if you see faces, they are tweaked. Otherwise, they're AI generated. It's something that has been generated through AI, which is not real. And that's why it's synthetic data. And then I'll move on to the real world problems, or what are some of the good things about generative AI. Like, how can we leverage generative AI in our day-to-day things, in our day-to-day job function, and how can generative AI help us solve a real world problem? The very first thing is content generation. Now, I would like to know from anybody in the audience, like, what this content generation is. Anybody who would like to say, like, take up a first pass? Anyone? Guys, just to pass, like, I highly encourage you to just, come up and speak through chat so that we can have a very interactive session and we are able to understand what's, you're talking about. Oh, plugate. I actually don't understand that, but I'll take that as an answer. But content generating, when we are talking about content creation or content generation, we are literally breathing in a world which is full of memes, TikToks, reels. What is all this? This is all content. Now, the question becomes, the kind of content we are generating through these applications, is it an original content, or it has been derived or generated synthetically through AI? So one aspect of generative AI is to create these contents, but another aspect is also to create information that is useful, which is through blogs, journals, where you see all these contents being created. You can literally have different perspective on the same topic through different people, and not everything is original in nature. A lot of things have been derived from perspective, a lot of things have been derived from original data, and that's how we see a flood of content that we see today on social media, we see today on any of the social platforms. That's content generation, and one of the things that help in generating this amount of content is gen AI or generative AI. Secondly, chat AI and data analysis. Now, one of the perfect examples of chat AI is ChatGPT, Bard. So let's see like how they can be useful in and resolving our day-to-day problems. Now, ChatGPT is and could be used along with chat boxes or these bots which are used to chat with people in real time. So have you ever been to a website and you see a pop-up, especially on the bottom right side, which says chat with us? So nowadays what's happening is, since the inception of chat GPT, what people have done is, or what companies have done is, they have integrated chat gpt with those chat boxes, and now the interaction has become very human and very elaborative. Now any question that you have for that chat boxes, you probably not get just a 2 or 3 line answers for that. You'll get a more explicit, more elaborative answers on your questions if you have ever used those chat functionalities on websites. So that's how ChatGPT is being used, or it's being leveraged to resolve those kind of problems, and basically automating every task that we have, especially in the chat with us, from chat with us perspective. So ChatGPT and like applications like this have been used to resolve these problems for us. Second thing is data analysis. Now, the question to the audience: any idea how chat gpt, let's take an example of chat gpt, how it is being used for data analysis? Any idea anybody has, like how chat gpt could be used for analyzing or having any kind of analytics done on data? Okay, I'll take that. I'm sorry, what was that?
Maybe to accelerate the process.
Maybe to, I'm sorry, what? I'm not able to understand. Maybe to
accelerate the process.
Well, that's correct. To automate. That's absolutely one of the uses of ChatGPT. I read, or not ChatGPT. Let me not take ChatGPT here. Basically, one of the ideas of generative AI as a whole is to automate or accelerate the process. That's correct. One of the problems with generative AI is it requires massive amounts of data to even create something or generate something. Now, oftentimes we see that this data is very sensitive in nature. It may have certain privacy requirements around it. It may have certain PII, personal data. It may have some health data. The data could be anything, and it could be sensitive in nature. Now, a lot of time what happens is, instead of, again, taking that original data into account, what ChatGPT does, it takes synthetic data in use, and which basically approximates, or which basically mimics the original data. And analysis is performed on that synthetic data, and it can generate reports, perspectives, and reviews out of it, out of the analytics that is being done on this synthetic data. And that's how even chat gpt or generative ai could be used to perform data analytics on data which could be sensitive in nature, but yet we are able to do this kind of analysis because we have synthetic data which mimics the original data in place. And that's how we are able to come up with a data analysis on probably sensitive data. Third thing is generate code, and I don't think I need to diverge too much into generate code, because a lot of coders out here might be using ChatGPT for generating codes, and this is one of the things, and actually one of the most helpful things is to have a code in place, or have some kind of what should I say, dummy code in place that we can quickly refer to in ChatGPT and kind of customize it and readily use. And that's one of the very most used capability of ChatGPT that we had been able to leverage, is to generate code for our developers and coders. Lastly, risk and fraud detection. Anybody here who can just throw light on how it could be used for risk and fraud detection? And it's very easy. It actually ties back to data analysis. I'm looking at the chat, guys. Okay, I guess no one. Oh, yes, exactly. It identifies patterns. So, yes, so it's literally called as identifying signatures or feeding signatures to the program. So, one of the things that is very, innate to AI is it works on inputs, and inputs or signatures or patterns could be fed to generate again, or even to modify, because AI or Gen AI is a self-learning program. It generates something, it learns something from it, and it applies on the program itself. So it is very easy to generate signatures or modify signatures or update signatures to identify certain patterns, which could be very useful in identifying risk and frauds. It could be used in banking, it could be used in insurance, it could be used in any industry where you need to identify cyber frauds or digital frauds. So that's very, very helpful use of Gen AI in identifying those risks and frauds based out of signatures or modifying the signatures. Hey, thanks, Damien. Thanks. That was a good answer. So moving on to see, now we have a new technology in place, which is Gen AI, but every technology, it comes with a cost. So let's see what are the costs that are involved or associated with this new technology. And when I say cost, it literally means the cyber risk or the risk or security challenges we have with Gen AI. Now, nurturing a new technology like Gen AI is like, which can train itself, is like walking on a double-edged sword. Now, anybody in the audience who can just comment on this statement, why having a technology like Gen AI, which is able to train itself, is like walking on a double-edged sword. And by double-edged sword here, I mean is that we need to be really careful about this technology. Anybody who would like to take a pass on why it's like that? Okay, I'll explain the reason. I really like that. Estras, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. I'm really sorry about that. But yes, that's something that's very true. AI is getting more and more intelligent, and I would say with the crap that we are producing on social media as well. Eyes open association, yeah. AI is like a baby. Yes, I can interpret it as something that is very naive, but is very new, and we are still exploring the options for this. Like, what is the true potential of AI, which is still left to be explored or unleashed? Yes, absolutely correct. So yeah, so AI is something which is very new. Generative AI is, again, within AI, it's a very new and niche domain which we are trying to explore, which we are feeding data to, and trying to see what potential it has and what kind of data it is producing. And the reason is, even though we are able to identify what it can do, like I would say partially identify what it can do, security challenges which it comes with us are yet to be identified. We still do not know what our exposure to such technology is in terms of cyber risks. So I'll take it one by one. The very first thing is data privacy and theft. Now, again, a question to the audience, like why it is a risk? Why do you think data privacy is a risk? And the answer is very easy. I think we had been discussing this in our presentation. So anybody, Esdras, Damien, since you both have commented before. Absolutely. Eyes open association. Absolutely. It's because of the data we are collecting. And there is literally no filter on the data we are collecting and feeding to these AI applications or algorithm. And that's why data privacy and theft are, data privacy is a concern, and theft or stolen identities is an outcome of it that could happen, because there is so much amount of data that is being fed today, and there is no filter on what kind of data we are, feeding. There is still a very small subset of data which we have identified that we do not have to feed to these Gen AI applications, but still there is much more to go. Organizations train their software using data without their conscious authorization. That's absolutely true. And one of the reasons, and we're going to discuss it in the following slides, like why it is that, why exactly what Estras has written here, organization train their software using user data without any kind of authorization. We're going to answer that. But yes, coming to data privacy and theft. Yes, so data privacy is an actual concern because there is a lot of data which is going or inputted into these AI algorithms, and there is no filter. Now, what are the outcomes? Now, the outcomes could be data breaches, since there is no filter, there is no restriction on the kind of data that is being fed. There is an absolute chance of data breaches. There is an absolutely chance of stolen identities. There is absolute chance of theft of this data, which could be, and the data doesn't really need to be PII or like PHI. The data, anything that is sensitive or confidential to an organization, is a sensitive or private data, and that needs to be protected. And theft of these kind of data could be very devastating for organizations. Now, coming to the second point, deep fakes. Now, I have to ask this question to everybody. Do you have an idea of what deep fakes are, what it is? And I'm sure everybody must have seen that. Whoever is on Instagram, Facebook, Threads, Reels, TikToks, they must have seen that. So yeah, what are deep fakes? Yes, they are fake videos. And not only videos, they are fake images, they are fake text, they are fake perspectives. So the thing which deepfakes is, and this is very much related to the misinformation that we used to see in older times, that used to publish in newspapers and everything. And people used to come and say that, hey, I did not say that, it's the news reporter who has written these things for me, but I never said that. So you can literally draw an analogy of deep fakes to the misrepresentation of information that we used to have in older times. So deep fake is anything which is either media or text that is a misrepresentation or misinformation. Now, everybody has seen fake AI generated images of celebrities and politicians. We have seen videos where you see something that is happening in that video which is not true, because that has been AI generated or AI modified. And again, some information that has been posted on blogs or text media or social media, which has been modified or which has been misinterpreted. So what do I mean by misinterpretation here? So the actual author said something, but AI or Gen AI interpreted in a way which totally changed its meaning, and it was published on social media. So everything of that nature is basically deepfakes. Now, what are the harms of deepfakes? So I'll start with generally, something that is not true is coming up on social media. That is fine. But what is the impact of such information that we are reading, which we are seeing, which we are, through videos and images that we are seeing today? What is the impact? Perfect. That's damages reputation. Anything else that you can think of as an impact that these deep fakes or misinformation or misrepresentation of information could have? I'll tell you one. They literally have potential to create a public opinion. So usually, a lot of times, and I used to see this a lot in my country, so there's something called as polarization, which happens during election. So polarization is basically creating a perspective or creating a public opinion. And the way public opinion is created, the public starts, favoring one candidate over others. So this happens a lot in during elections. And I guess, in every country. So deepfakes, when you're misrepresenting information, they have the potential to create certain public opinions and even manipulate public opinions and create certain kind of polarization. That's correct. Manipulation. You create manipulation amongst public or general users. And election is just one example. There are a lot of other avenues where you can, create bias and discrimination and public opinions against anything else. So that is one of the most, I believe, in my personal opinion, one of the most harmful effects of deepfakes that could be. Coming to increasing complexity of cyber attacks, and of course, technology is becoming so and so complex, and Gen AI is nothing new on that perspective. So one of the examples here that I can give of Gen AI is Gen AI could be used to mimic, let's say, an extremely well, automated phishing attack. Now, everybody of us understands what phishing is, I hope. And for those who do not, so phishing is basically sending emails or sending, correspondences to certain targeted users, which mimic something which mimics basically something that is coming from a legit source. The target or the user who receives such phishing emails thinks that it is coming from a very legit source, but in fact it is not. So we can have Gen AI generate or craft certain emails which look very natural, which looks very legit in nature, and we can have them automated. We can literally have an automated phishing attack on target users using Gen AI. Another example I could give here is using, having a automated DDoS attack, a denial of service attack. So Gen AI could be used to automate all these things. So just imagine a DDoS starting, on some server or some organization on day 1, and then day 2, and then day 3. So it could be crafted, it could be automated. So a lot of these complexities, and why they are complex in nature, so that they are not easily, defendable, easily preventable, or even easily identifiable. Lastly, creating bias. Now, this is something that is related to number 2, deepfakes. Not completely, but a lot of the inspiration on creating bias comes from deepfakes. Now, I had already given you one example of election campaigns. Can you think of any other example where there could be a bias created? Anything that is organizational related? Where you're trying to create any kind of bias in an organization, where deepfakes or Gen AI could be used to create that. And if not, I can give you one example. So usually nowadays what happens is the talent acquisition team or the hiring team, they're no more manually sorting or identifying the resumes. It is basically fed to a program. All the resumes are being fed to a program, and that program identifies or shortlists the resumes based on some keywords in the job description. So we have started seeing that these applications are using more and more AI to shortlist the best candidates out of the resume. Now, just imagine a scenario where such an application is fed an input that you have to shortlist a candidate within the North American region because they are usually good with a certain technology. Now, over time, this is going to create a bias within North American people and South American people, that certain ABC company only hires North Americans and not South Americans. And this is just a hypothetical example that I'm giving on what could be done if technology is not used wisely. What could be done? And there could be a lot of other bias based on other parameters that could be created in an organization, in a community, or even in a country. So that's the cost that is associated with new technologies like Gen AI and the potential there and the potential impact they could make on a community as a whole. So going ahead, yes. So now that we have discussed like what are some of the problems or security challenges with Gen AI, I think the presentation would be incomplete if we do not talk about the workarounds that. Now, mitigating security challenges in Gen AI is a consolidated effort. Now, can someone in the audience tell me how this needs to be a consolidated effort? Or let's not discuss how, why this needs to be a consolidated effort. From an organizational perspective, like why do you think any security challenge could or should be a consolidated effort? Anyone from the audience? Okay. So the reason why security challenges are a consolidated effort, so mitigation of these challenges, I'm sorry, is a consolidated effort, is because security cannot operate in silos. Security is basically supporting the digital infrastructure. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Security is a concern of everyone. Why is that? Because everyone is using security in one or the other way. Security literally supports the digital world, the digital data, the digital infrastructure. And hence, it cannot work in silos. It cannot be mitigating something in silos. Security needs security people, it needs IT people, it needs business people. It needs someone from each and every function from an organization to be either a contributor or a representative or just be informed. But it requires everyone from each function in an organization. And that is the reason. And Gen AI is no different. This is the reason it needs to be a consolidated effort. Now let's look at some things. And again, this is not an exhaustive list. The list goes beyond these 4 points, but just in the interest of everyone's time and for this presentation, I could prioritize what could be mapped back to the challenges we have talked in the previous slide. Now, very first thing is data classification and enforcing data protection. Now, this goes back to data privacy challenge that we have with Gen AI. Now, till the time organizations do not identify what's confidential for me, what's sensitive for me, what is important for me to protect in terms of data, you're bound to have bound to have data privacy issues. The first and the foremost is you need to classify your data, what's sensitive, what's confidential, what could be public, what needs to be protected. You need to have these things written in a policy or procedure, and then you enforce data security on these data. If something is confidential, what are the data security parameters that are applicable to that data? If something is very sensitive, what are the data security standards that are used there? If something is public, it doesn't mean that it needs to be out in public always. If something is public, that means even if it is accessible by public, there is no harm for the public to know that. So what is my data classification standard and what is my data security approach is very important. And that is one of the first steps that you take in protecting your data. Second is, just a second, I'm sorry. Second is training and awareness. Now, there are a lot of industries that we have today that exist in real world, which are not technical in nature. I would take an example of, let's say, healthcare. In healthcare system, when we talk about healthcare environment, we talk of a system where we have doctors, we have nurses, we have general, healthcare management staff, which takes payment, they give they give medicines, they take care of everything logistic in nature with the patients. We have insurance agents, we have medical health plan agents and everything, medical something we call as medical providers. So we have all these people, doctors, nurses, management staff is not necessarily technical people. Like they're not necessarily technical in nature. This is the reason why people who are working in an organization or in a system who are leveraging digital assets for their day-to-day function, they need to be trained on security. They need to be trained on security awareness. And essentially, they need to be trained on a good security behavior. What is your good security behavior? What is your security mindset? Anybody who's working in a digital world needs to be aware of a good security behavior and a security mindset. In essence, they need to be trained that you could get an email, but you need to see if that is a phishing email. So there has to be training on those things. There has to be a training that when you are dealing with patient data, you're dealing with patient name, email, phone numbers, their medical history, you just don't have to share it with anybody. There has to be a proper channel, there has to be a proper process where you can share data with certain people and you do not share data with certain people or entities. People, staff, anybody who's working in that environment, they need to be trained on these things. And that is the reason training and awareness becomes immensely important, because if your people are not trained on the security behavior, lapses are bound to happen. So everybody needs to be, made aware of, from a security standpoint, what you need to share, what you don't need to share. Thirdly, a robust cyber governance. Now, usually cybersecurity governance is something which nobody cares about. This is what I've seen and experienced, but this is again something that becomes immensely important. I'm sorry. This is also something which becomes immensely important whenever we talk about a top-down approach in cyber. So there has to be a leadership which decides what happens to our cybersecurity program, and it is brought down towards the people who are working on the ground in a top-down approach. So till the time there are certain policies in place, there are certain processes in place, there are certain procedures in place, people won't have anything to follow. And that's where governance becomes immensely important. You need to have certain policies. There has to be a certain process. There has to be a certain KPI where you think you would be able to, judge the success of your cybersecurity program. There has to be a policy for data classification. There has to be a policy for data security enforcement or data security approach. There has to be a policy of training and awareness. There has to be a policy of general governance on how we are educating our people, how we are governing our people from a security perspective. Now, the fourth one is intentionally kept as a question mark, and I would like to open to the audience like what they think the fourth one should be. What is that one function or one thing within security that should be prioritized on this deck based on what we had discussed? Anybody would want to take a stab on what that fourth thing could be? And it's very common, it's fairly common. We talk about it all the time. All right, let me tell you. Oh, Demi, my question was, what is the fourth, mitigating step that should be here on this slide based on the discussion we had had? So it's proactive vigilance or incident management. Now, incident management is very broad. It entails a lot of processes and functions, and that's why, just to ease things out here, I've written proactive vigilance on security, lapses, on security incidents. Now, incident management is also something that could be outsourced, but there has to be something within the company where, which provides certain governance or decisions on how do you have to manage your incidents. And that's the reason it becomes very important. Every organization needs to make a decision that if there is a certain incident, let's say ransomware, you can outsource monitoring and detection. You can outsource, how your incident would be contained, how the forensic would happen, how you'll create the report. You can outsource these things. One thing that an organization needs to decide on their own is what action do they need to take when an incident happens. And this is something that an organization needs to take itself based on the business strategies and the data that is important for the organization is, and it cannot be outsourced in most of the cases. Why? Because let's say if there is a ransomware attack, now it's upon the organization to decide if there is a ransomware attack, what would my strategy or what would my decision be? If there is, let's say, a DDoS attack, what I need to do? If there is a remote code execution, what my IT team or what the outsourced team that is sitting there, I'm paying the outsourced MSSP, what they need to do. So organizations need to have that decision-making power within themselves on what they need to do if an incident happens. And that's why it becomes really important here, that managing those incidents, nothing is 100% secure, and we all of us know that. No matter how much you secure your environment, there are lapses, there are security incidents that are bound to happen. And when they do, what is our preparedness to tackle those incidents? So I'll take a pause there and see what all questions do we have. We are just reached the end of our deck here. So there are twofold to this question. So the question is, but how organizations can monitor generative AI? So the best answer I could provide here is monitoring the data that has been inputted to generative AI algorithms. So there has to be a filter, there has to be some restrictions, there has to be a process that defines what could go as an input to these Gen AI algorithms and what should be retracted back. So anything that is PII related, anything that's sensitive information for an organization should be by de facto refrained from going as an input to Gen AI. I hope that answers your questions, Demi.
Okay. Other questions? No, okay, same. Okay, go on.
Yeah, sorry. Is it really possible for an organization to protect itself against Gen AI? So, Demi, yeah, and I know you have written because employees can still submit sensitive information. So I'll answer the latter part first. Employees can still submit sensitive information. So there has to be mechanisms in place again. And, we have absolutely fantastic tools that we have today that are present, which can identify information what has been provided, or which can even detect, based on certain keywords. So yes, there could be filter, there could be mechanisms in place which literally refrains employees to submit sensitive information, to output sensitive information, or just to provide sensitive information. Now, I'm coming to the first part now. Is it really possible for an organization to protect itself against Gen AI? So Gen AI, in its essence, is not something that's harmful to us. It's the use of Gen AI that makes it, positive or negative in nature. So we need to see that how positively or how effective and efficiently we use Gen AI to do, or to resolve problems or to solve real world problems, along with seeing that what kind of information we provide. And honestly, there has to be a gray area, because we just cannot restrict everything and expect a program to produce a certain desired output. There has to be a gray area where we accept that risk that, yes, we have to provide a certain information which is sensitive or confidential, because it is going to create a desired output. And that is the risk which we need to accept or have a mitigation around. Is using Esdras, is using generative AI to create content not a threat to future of digital marketing? Well, honestly, it's not a threat to digital marketing per se. I think it's a blessing for digital marketing, because the potential it has to create contents, to visually pleasing contents is great. But I think the problem is what kind of impact that digital marketing is going to create for the users, for the end users or the target audience. That is something which could be debatable. When more prospects become aware of what they could lose trust in companies and products, I'm like, yeah, that's true. But again, it again depends on what kind of impact that marketing campaign is creating for its targeted audience. And is it, like creating a negative impact against something? It is polarizing people, or it's creating a bias or an opinion amongst the general public, is what I think. Do you think the owners of generative AI should be held responsible for the lack of security in federal and whenever it comes from? Uh, well, I don't think, Damien, I'm in a position to answer that, whether the owners of, and, okay, let me take a step back. Let's say if I own a company and if I have an algorithm on generative AI, yes, then absolutely yes. So if my company is creating a Gen AI algorithm, so it becomes my responsibility to see what kind of inputs I'm providing to that algorithm. Yes. But that is generally not true if we use a Gen AI program of other company like ChatGPT. Then it's on the users that they should not provide sensitive information to publicly available softwares. Any other questions? I really like those questions. What impact might emerging technologies like blockchain have on security of? Honestly, I cannot answer that question. I'm sorry, Eyes Open Association, because I'm not an expert on blockchain. So I don't have an idea. I can find an answer and just email back it to you. But right now, I cannot I just don't want to provide any wrong information based on my limited information on blockchain. What is the current state of AI regulation? I guess from an AI perspective, I don't see any formalized regulations, but there are regulations in place from data privacy perspective on what is fed to these AI algorithms. So those regulations, they are in place. I can name certain data privacy regulations for AI, but there are no AI related regulations, at least that I know of. I can provide an email back to Audrey on that question on specific data privacy regulations on AI. I can find out those names.
Yeah.
How can collaboration between industry expert researchers and policymakers help address challenges in generative AI? Now, this is, again, so this needs to be a very collaborative effort between industry experts, researchers, and policymakers, and especially from a policy making perspective, because when you make policies, for organizations in general public, there has to be some inputs that is coming from industry experts and researchers on what are the pros and cons of generative AI. So it has to be a very elaborative effort where we see what could be the boon or bless for the organization, what could be a boon or bless for the general public when using, generative AI, like how harmful generative AI could be for targeted community or audience, or how blissful it could be. What are the good things about generative AI? What are the bad things about generative AI? For example, there could be a policy where they say that generative AI could be used for blind children in blind schools to teach them or educate them. There has to be a policy from a community level on those things. But again, it requires, industry experts and researchers on their inputs. So yes. I hope that answered your question.
Yes. Is the last question?
Is there a security framework to address challenges So there is no security framework for Gen AI specifically. I think the security framework, which is NIST, as you mentioned, or the NIST, even the risk management framework is applicable when we talk about Gen AI.
Okay.
Anything else? Thank you.
And no, any question?
No, I guess not, Anisha. Thank you, Audrey. Thank you for facilitating, and thank you for being such a fantastic audience. Thank you.
Thank you too. That was a pleasure to have you during this presentation, during this conference. And I will share with you, with the audience, your LinkedIn, so that they will, yes, they will maybe get in touch with you, and in case there are more questions about generative AI and all those security challenges. Why not major acquisitions?
Of course. Mergers and acquisitions, you can ping me anytime. I can help anyone with mergers and acquisitions. Thank you, guys.
Okay. So it was a pleasure again to have you there. And we hope to see you next year also for interesting topics. So I just want to also inform the audience that you will be speaking. We'll be having a panel tomorrow, with some other experts concerning challenges, the security challenges also around the artificial intelligence too. So I hope people will be around to see and to watch that kind of exchange from experts and then extract the knowledge about that. Thanks, and see you tomorrow.
Bye. Thank you.
So now we are heading to the third. Okay, just yes. We are heading to the third presentation of this evening, and